Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Today's show is the second part of my conversation with Reuben Archer, rock musician, author and artist. And in this episode, we hear all about Reuben's rock music career, right through from Lautrec, Lionheart and Stampede, as well as his more recent work as a solo artist. But hang on, don't we need some more appropriate music? Just a second. We then talk about Reuben's return to the sphere of fine arts with his watercolour painting, and we hear how after the publication of his recent autobiography, The Rock N Rollercoaster Ride, this has become the inspiration for a new work, this time fiction, which is to be released late in September.
I've just finished another book.
Do you know what? I was going to ask you that. You should write.
Yeah.
You just finished another one?
Yeah, but what happened was I said to Roger, I actually really like writing this. I used to like writing for the magazine. The problem was I had to have a good sub, to put my awful grammar into prose. So as long as I got that, I'm okay. And Roger said, well, I'll do that, you know. So I said, well, I'm going to write another one. This was about 3 weeks ago, but it's going to be a novel. It's a story, not. I can't do another. I can't do. It's another. So, but I'm going to do a story about a kid. Okay. So the kid sees a red Strat in a shop, and he gets incensed, like every kid does with music. And it's the story of how he goes right from the age of 17, and he gets a band together. He gets a couple of breaks. It's all a little bit, they're not very good, but they get noticed, and so it's the usual story.
And does it take place in the present day?
No, it's in 1978.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so you've got no mobile phones, you've got no computers. So you see, it is my story, but in somebody else's guise. And it's Lawrence. And basically, he is Lawrence. It deviates a little bit from reality, but
so Lawrence is your son that you played in Stampede with, isn't
he?
Yeah. And does Lawrence know about the story?
I just asked him. I'm using a photograph of the front cover of him, which we've doctored up, and I've told him what it's about, but he didn't know it's about him. No. But basically, the kid goes on, and they end up getting a deal. It's called "So You Want to Be a Rock Star." Seriously? ? So it's kind of, you want to do this, you get incensed, but do you actually know what you're doing and where it's, because it isn't going to be what you think it is, and it's not going to be easy.
And when's the book coming out, Reuben?
Well, it's done. It's all edited. Now, it's all illustrated. I've done the illustrations because Jimmy, this is how you get caught up in this kind of thing. It's like the detail. It's like, I remember in 1978 seeing this guy walking around with a leather-bound Filofax. Now, I didn't know it was a Filofax because we didn't know about them here. But he'd got this in America, and they'd already been out in America for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden in 1980, they became the must-have thing. Everybody that was anybody walked around with a mobile phone and a bloody Filofax.
Yeah, the yuppies.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So he bought himself a Filofax. Jimmy bought himself a Filofax at airport in LA, and he used to use it to make these sketches. Everything he did, he couldn't help himself. He wanted to go to art school, but he never did. And he worked in a packing company, but he ends up working in a music shop. But so there's about 10 pages of illustrations throughout the book, which are all by sketches by Jimmy of what went on and the concerts and all the crap that went down in LA and stuff like this. But they're not. I did them, but they're all made to look like Jimmy did them. and they're all in his leather-bound filofax and a picture of that. So it's kind of a lot of good things happen to him, and he becomes really good, and he becomes really well known as a guitarist. But everything goes wrong. He gets a major deal that goes wrong. He plays lead guitar for one of the biggest English icons in rock, who lives in LA and wants an English band. So he forms the English band behind this guy, and he records an album, and they go on tour, and they get to England, and they get to 3 venues into the tour at Birmingham Odeon, and the guy has a heart attack because he's a coke addict. And so the story goes on until at the end. Well, I'm not going to tell you the end because people reading the book. So yeah, it's all sorts of things that happen. And the good thing about it is, because we know about the technicalities of the business, when you're talking about someone on stage, we know where the jack plugs go, we know where this goes, we know about who's in charge of this, who's in charge. So all the technical parts are in place because we've been there and done it. But then you've got that coupled with the actual storyline makes it quite interesting.
Well, if it's anything like the current book, I'm really looking forward to when that comes out. And I guess you'll be sort of promoting that through your Facebook and website and everything.
It'll be sold off the website because I'm not looking for publishers. But the thing about it is, and now you get to the end of the book, and there's going to be another one which I've already started. It's a sequel. So Jimmy is now 21, and you don't know what he's going to fame. You don't know what he's going to do next, but boy, there's going to be some major things going on and some disaster.
Do you have a writing sort of regime, a process? How do you write? What's your way of writing?
Start and carry on.
Just get your bum on your seat and type.
Yeah, stuff just comes. It's like writing songs. You haven't got a clue what you're going to write about.
Do you have like a certain time of day that you do it, or how does that work? It's
been annoying to some people. I mean, I got to the point where I can't sleep because of this. Well, I broke my arm in Gran Canaria about 6 months ago, and ever since then I've got muscle problems in the arm, and it really hurts. So I can't sleep. So I've been ending up with the usual bottle of wine till 3 o'clock in the morning writing, and then you probably spend about 2 or 3 hours. You sort of binge on it really, and then don't do anything for a couple of days, and then I've got an idea, and then you do that. So it's just a process of if and when, and it's good fun. The hard thing is, which Roger has brought to my attention, is when you start writing this, and you write it in a kind of personal tense. He did this, and you got sections where he'll be talking and saying something, and then it switches back, and then you go into another tense where you say, and then they did this and they did that, where you're not actually talking to the bloke, you're in a kind of different space of time, and that can be really confusing. So someone like Roger came along and sort of comes along and puts it all into one or the other, so it flows. And the other thing was, and you probably know all this anyway, but the one mistake I made was, because I'm going along making this up on the spur of the moment, and you'll come up with a guy, say Bill Smith, he does so and so, and then you get 4 chapters on and you can't remember his name, and he crops up, and you go, who is that guy? And then this happens all the time, So every time you create a character, you need to write on a separate pad his name and what he does, so that you can always refer to it. Because otherwise, you spend hours going over what you've done, trying to find out who that guy was. It's like,
And I suppose after a few glasses of wine, it's harder.
Oh yeah, yeah.
One thing in the book, obviously, that you're very famous for, Reuben, is Stampede, new wave of British heavy metal in the early 80s. Can you tell us a little bit about how the band got together?
Yeah. Well, the band got together because I did mention earlier, when we lived in Somerset, I'd got the job to design the new geology gallery in Bristol Museum and Art Gallery. That was my job. I moved from London to do that. And we bought this place. In fact, we bought 5 houses in about 3 years and did them up and sold them. And eventually moving back to Bristol. And during this period, Lawrence and I had started playing, and we tried out different people, swapped and changed, and we got a little band together in near Shepton Mallet, and it was called Shady Business, awful name, and that morphed into Thriller, and then we did the first proper gig at Lawrence's school, and he became a bit of a hero. And by this time he was really, really good, and it had only been about a year. And anyway, we were just sort of so set in our minds that we were going to do this, and we ended up with a good band, and that we were told by this guy that was managing. If you read this later book, you'll see all this. It was excuse me. We got this manager guy, and he said, I'm going to get you a tour and try and get you a record deal. And we ended up getting offered the tour with Saxon just before they broke it. And it was about 20 dates. We did that. And I changed the name of the band to Lautrec, as in Toulouse Lautrec. And we just became established. And we got write-ups in Sounds and Kerrang and things like that, and we got a deal, and they released a single called, which we, on the tour, I realised our music wasn't quite right for the punters. They wanted something harder, and the Saxon had done Wheels of Steel, so we went into the studio in Shepperton Studios, and we recorded a song called Mean Gasoline. And on the B-side was Shoot Out the Lights. And it was very much in the Wheels of Steel vein, but not sounding like them. And that single, incidentally, now, 2 or 3 years ago, I was told it was being auctioned on in the business for about 600 quid.
Oh,
because
really?
it's now reputed to be the rarest single in the new wave of British heavy metal movement.
Oh, wow.
Now, if you want one, it will cost you $2,500. It was a very limited run. And and it's all in the heavy metal encyclopedias and all that stuff. But anyway, Lautrec kind of soldiered on, but we couldn't get a proper deal. And we didn't have the right management. And I was told by the PR that worked for Saxon that Bleckner Poxon, who managed them, they'd got a new project and they might want a singer. But they couldn't tell me at the time. So it went on for a couple of weeks, and by this time I was staying down in London all the time trying to get deals and things together. And it turned out that Ron Bleckner and Dave Poxon had signed Dennis Stratton because he'd got the sack from Maiden, and they'd put a band round him, or he'd put a band round, and they'd had a singer that did the marquee called Jess Cox, and they didn't like him, and they were looking for a new singer. So did I want to go for it? So I said, I'll go. So I went for the audition, and I got the job.
Yeah.
And that I had to tell Lawrence, and I wasn't doing Lautrec anymore, which was all a bit sad. So he soldiered on with it, but it didn't go anywhere. And I joined this thing, and we rehearsed and recorded, did some videos. And in fact, Dave Poxon, one of the managers, is now one of my best friends. He's an artist, lives very close by. He's a world famous watercolor artist, and he got me back into it. But anyway, it got to a point where their management said, "You haven't got any songs," and I said, "Well, that's because basically Dennis, bless him, plays riffs, which are basically like Iron Maiden, and I mean they're not songs." I said, "Well, we need some structured." So they said, "Well, you do it. You get on it." I said, "Well, it's not my band." And so, "Well, you write songs. Get on with it." So, oh, God, here we go. So I said to Dennis one day, "Can't you do something like Russ Ballard did for Rainbow? Sort of since you've been gone, da 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 da. So the vocals can go in between the chord pattern, and it's not just one continuous riff." So he went away and came back on the Monday with this arrangement, and I called it Dangerous Games, and we recorded it, and it was really, really good, and they loved it, and we went and did more demos for, I think it was the EMI, but it didn't go anywhere, and it was becoming more and more. We did a tour on our own all over England, and then we got the White Snake tour. We supported White Snake, and that went down really, really well. And Lionheart was known as the new wave of British heavy metal supergroup. But I was getting more and more embarrassed and sort of kind of troubled with the fact that I although he didn't really make it known, I'm sure Dennis was basically pretty pissed off with the fact that I was the front man and I was also writing the songs, and it just felt all wrong, and I didn't actually like what we were playing. A lot of their previous stuff that they'd put together before I got in there, and I didn't like any of it. The whole thing just wasn't right, and I left. And I was sitting in a sounds called up and said, "We want to speak to you and Lawrence. What's going on now? You've left Lautrec, you've joined, and what are you going to do?" So I had to do this interview, and I can't remember where it was, in Camden or somewhere. And the journalist said, "Well, what are you going to do now then?" And as usual, like you said, you just take the opportunity, and you're not gonna sort of like fall down. So and lie there. So I just said, "Well, we got a new band." Said, "New band?" So we're rehearsing. It's all lies. And she said, "What's it called?" And, before that, I had left Lionheart, and on the last night of the gig at the Marquee, a guy came up to me and said, "Jimmy Bain, who used to be with Dio, he's got a band called Wild Horses and he wants to reform it. Can you go and talk to him?" So I went over to the bar and I talked to Jimmy, and he lived in Twickenham. And cut a long story short, I went round his house. We started sitting down, and he said, "Right, but he was out of it all the time, totally out of it.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, we haven't got a guitarist because Robbo had left. So had I can't remember the other.
Was it John Lockton?
Oh, John was in it. It was John that got me introduced to him.
Because I saw I saw Wild Horses. I think it's about 78 and 79 when Neil Carter was with them and Clive Edwards.
That was the original lineup.
Yeah,
but they all fell out when Robbo left. Nelly went off and played with UFO, and I don't know what's his name, Clive did, because I know Clive really well. But anyway, all Jimmy had was John Lockton, and we were using Phil Lynott's garden studio, his conservatory, to write songs. So we'd go around to Phil's every day and just use the studio. And so I said, "Well, we need another guitar player and a drummer." So when I was falling out with Lionheart, I knew that Dennis didn't like Frank Noon's drumming. And Frank was like me, he was uneasy about everything. And I said to him, "Look, I've got this thing going with Jimmy Bain. We need a drummer, and I'm going to get Lawrence in on guitar." I was Jimmy's on bass, so that's cool. So that's what happened. I got Lawrence in, and the new Wild Horses were formed, and we were managed by Lizzie's management, Morrison O'Donnell, and but the problem was Jimmy was so, I don't want to say anything horrible about him because I liked him, but he was so bad on God knows what. I mean, seriously, that we couldn't really get anything done. We did a residency at the Marquee 4 nights, and every night Phil Lynott got up and did the encore with us, and we ran that place. But recording-wise, nobody had touched Jimmy, and we couldn't get a deal. And so I finally left. And that's when this journalist said, well, you've been in 3 bands now, what are you going to do? And then and we were sitting there, and I said, well, we got a new band. So, well, what is it? What's it called? So thinking, what the hell am I going to call it? and I'm sitting there thinking, Wild Horses. What do Wild Horses do? Stampede. It's called Stampede.
Yeah, very good.
And she said, oh, right. And then wrote all this up. And the next thing is it's all in the press. New band coming, Stampede. And I thought, well, I've got to get a decent manager because we aren't going to go anywhere. And I was talking to Chris Tangarides, and I went over to Maida Vale where he was producing somebody, and he said, well, I know this guy used to work for Don Arden, and Don's just sold Jet Records, and so now they're
that's Don Arden of Sharon Osbourne fame.
Yeah. The big villain. And so he'd got ELO and he'd got Magnum, I think he had, and anyway, he'd sold it all. So these guys were looking for jobs that worked for him. And one of them was a guy called Ronnie Fowler, who was kind of Don's right-hand man. And so Chris Tangarides said, go and, here's his phone number, call him up. He's looking for a band. He's going to go out on his own. So I called Ronnie up, and he'd got a big house up in Weybridge, and real old school Arthur Daly manager. And I liked him, and I got on well with him. And we'd got some demos done that Lawrence and I had done, and I gave it to him, and he really liked them. So he said, it took about 2 weeks, but he said, if you want, I'll manage you. We'll draw up some sort of contract. I've got a publishing business, and so I was still technically living in Bristol and moved, but we used to use this studio in a square in Bristol called Cave. It was in a basement of a Georgian house, and we loved it. And the 2 guys that ran it were fantastic, and they only had an 8-track, but we'd gone in there and done demos with Lautrec, and I went down and saw them, and they said, well, we just got a 24-track, so it's a lot easier now, less bouncing down. And so I said, well, I've got to record 4 or 5 tracks to give to Polydor because they're interested. So we booked the studio for a week, and we'd already rehearsed these songs. We used to get everything absolutely as it was going to go down. No sitting in the studio writing, all. And we went in there and we did the 5 tracks, and Ronnie took them off to Polydor, and we got signed. Major deal.
Did that include Days of Wine and Roses?
Yeah, that was the Days of Wine and Roses EP.
Yeah, well, I bought the live bootleg album in about, would it be 1982 or 3, I guess?
That was recorded at Reading and Milton Hall in 82.
Yeah, that's it. And I got that, and I'd heard Wine and Roses, Days of Wine and Roses on the radio, and I think that was the strength of what made me buy the album. It's a great album. Those tracks that we recorded in Cave, Polydor just took them and put them on that EP, Days of Wine and Roses, and shoved it out as it was. And then they said, right, we need an album, but we want to get something done really quickly, because if you think about it, at that time, heavy rock was going through a bit of a bad time. All these major labels have got these bands, but there was new wave. Punk had
sort of gone, but new wave was there. But there was this new romantic thing coming in.
That's right. Yeah,
and they would just drop you like that to go on. So they were really anxious to get something out. And they said, we're going to record your Reading Festival set and your Milton Hall set, and we're going to put that out as a live album and call it a bootleg. And so they got the Rolling Stones mobile, and they recorded both the sets. And we would just, live album, first album, that's ridiculous, awful.
That's unusual, isn't it?
But yeah, so they put it out, and it started to sell. And it didn't do anything fantastic. But the problem with it was, then they said, right, now you've got to do a studio album, which was the Hurricane Town.
Yeah.
The problem with that was, when we recorded those festivals, the energy level was so high, it comes over. I mean, everybody that's ever since said that is the best thing we ever did. I mean, and there was a reason for that. But, well, we got this new drummer, who we nicknamed Shirley Temple. He's a lovely guy. He's out he lives out in the Middle East now, but still plays. He'd never played to a big audience. We got him because Frank Noon left, because I'd gone through this time in hospital, and I came out of hospital on crutches. And
I have to say, Reuben, there's one or two times, well, more than one or two times in the book where you talk about breaking various bones and things.
Yeah, I've done, I think it's 15 different breaks up to now. It's crazy. Wow. I seem to be prone to it. But I said to the specialist, I said, do you think there's something wrong with my bones? They're weak or something. I keep breaking them. He said, no, you just do stupid things. So, but so Eddie, we get up on stage and we timed it exactly to 50 minutes. Clock on the stage, that's it. You've got to do that. And Eddie, we had a solid 2 weeks rehearsal. Everything was perfect. He gets up on this massive riser. We had the Who's back line. We had John Entwistle's bass line. Lawrence had 4 Marshall stack. I mean, it was just incredible. And I had gone out on the stage with crutches and got to the mic stand, chucked the crutch away and we just went straight into it. And the first number, it's quite a fast number, but Eddie was so incensed at seeing 30,000 people out front, and he'd been doing a bit of speed, I think, because he did. And we just went into the whole set at breakneck speed. And that's how it went all the way through. And that's why the energy is there. It's like,
it comes across as a very powerful, energetic album. Album. It's great. Yeah.
But the sickening thing about that album is that the figures I got from Polydor weren't that good, and the deal fizzled out in the end. But since I've been over playing in Europe, and we did Belgium and we did Holland and France and stuff, I've never signed so many of those white albums.
Oh, really?
I've never.
And this is playing within the last few years. Stampede.
I've no idea that record got so far. And there's people in America.
Oh, really?
Oh, I tell you, there was something went on there that we don't know about, because that album's everywhere.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The original Stampede ceased to exist soon after that, I guess. And then you fast forward now to, was it 2013, the next album by Stampede was? Yeah,
well, Stampede, all the time, it was 2 years, 82, 83, into 84, I think. And we toured with Gary Moore, and we did 2 tours with him. But Hurricane Town didn't like the sales figures up much, or so we were told. And but it got a lot of press and it got reviews, but it just wasn't as powerful as that first album. And then we never had an A&R guy at Polydor. We had to make do with the label manager because they didn't have one. And then during our stint there, they got one called John Brierley, and he came in. But like all A&R guys, they've got a band they want to bring in. And he got Heavy Petting, and he got our manager to manage them, and it was pretty obvious that all the money was going. He was directing all the energy and money into this new project. So we just got left. And I realised that, and I just said, well, I've had it. I don't want to do this anymore. And we did one more gig at we decided we were going to call it a day, and we did a gig in the Red Lion in Brentford, right opposite from where I broke my hip and with Bruce. And I thought it'd just be a low key thing. That would be that. Draw a line under it. And we set up. We didn't have any gear, so we borrowed Phil Lynott took us up, and we borrowed all Lizzie's gear, and that was that. Set up, did a sound check, went home, and then came back at 8:00, and I thought there's not going to be anybody here. Went to get in the front door, couldn't. It was locked. Oh God, well that's it. Nobody's here. So we went round the back and came in through the kitchens, and then came out behind the stage, and I couldn't believe it. The whole place was completely rammed. They had to shut the doors to stop people coming in, the fire regs. And we played our last gig to a full house. I think Bernie Tormey, Paul Raymond, and various people, Gary Barnes got up and did stuff with us. And that was that. Yeah. And I started a business, and that's how it went for the next 18 years.
And that business was in exhibition furniture?
Well, it started off doing sign writing, which was the only thing I could do to sell to shops. And I did that for about 2 years. And then somebody said, oh, well, can you design us some business cards like the sign you've just done? So I did that. And then it just grew. And there was one particular, I dropped flyers off all over the place to put them through letterboxes of shops and offices and that. And I put one through an Art Deco building which used to be DER television rentals in Twickenham. And it was now, it looked like it was being done up. So I stuck one through there thinking they'll want some signs. And I got a call. And I went into the office, and they were like snobby lot. And it was a furniture company called Kesterport. And they do signs for us. So I did the signs, and then I did some more work. And then they said, I said, if you want any graphics done, I do all that as well. So they said, well, we want some adverts for the local Informer, big double page spreads of drawings of furniture. And so I did that. And then it got to a point where they said, we're deciding to, what else have you done? So I said, well, I trained as an exhibition designer, but I only stuck it. But they said, well, we're going to have a stand at the NEC. We're going to try it. And it was huge. So I designed it, and we built it. And I ended up working for these people right until I retired from it all a year ago. And they're still friends. They're absolute friends. So, I mean, and from that, all the other furniture companies saw what was going on with them. And it got to the point about 10 years ago where for the next 5 years, I was the biggest contractor at the NEC Furniture Show. I had every single major player in the UK furniture trade, which is all based in Long Eaton. And I had Wade Furniture, Welbeck, Jurest, all the big players.
All the big names,
and it just went crazy. And but I shot myself in the foot, because when it became obvious that they could buy all their furniture from China, and they started importing stuff instead of making it, and then with that came the publicity, and these Chinese people would even send teams of people over to build their stands. And because I just got so far into the furniture business instead of doing other people's work, it just kind of imploded. And it was still good, but it was never going to be like it was. And by that time anyway, I was getting... And also what had happened was Rock Candy had put out re-released Hurricane Town with a really nice booklet explaining it. And so I called up everybody and said, "Do you fancy doing some gigs?" And the upshot of that was they did, and we got back together again.
Yeah, and you recorded it. What was the last album?
Sudden Impulse.
Yeah,
that was the. But the problem was I have a barbecue every year, and loads of people come, and birthday thing, and on this one particular occasion, a guy I know here who I played with, because I had a blues band, and he used to stand in and he said, I really love this stuff. He said, and I said, well, I could do with another voice in the band.
Yeah.
And because Lawrence at the time didn't sing,
No.
Nobody did, and I'd always quite liked the twin guitar thing.
Yeah,
Lawrence.
I think it was like Thin Lizzy and Wild Horses and Wishbone Ash, for example. They get that extra bit of colour, I think, with two guitars.
Yeah, the problem is though, Lawrence, his style of playing, was such that it wasn't an ego thing. He just said, "I don't want to play with another player on stage, because when I play, the light and shade that I create is right for the track, but I don't want another guitar dirtying up the stuff. It's not so bad with keyboards, because that you can work with. So when I got Chris in, and of course we're now two guitars. Got the extra vocals, but Lawrence didn't like it at all. So that was that.
So how many albums have you had which are Personal Sin?
I've done 2. I did the first, which is called Personal Sin. The second one was Petrolhead, and I did another one which we didn't do any hard copies of. It's just purely download, which is called what's it called? We called the project The Brand.
Yeah. I've seen that. Yeah, on Spotify. I've seen.
Yeah, to me, it's one of the best things we've done.
And I've listened to all of those 3. Have you got any more recording coming up at all?
Yeah, I'd started one with Russ Waring, the guitarist that I did the last thing with, and in his studio. I love his playing. He's just a brilliant. He's not a heavy rock player, but it's hard rock, bluesy player with a lot of. He's just very, very talented, and I loved it. But he's also a great producer, and he's got a great studio. So we started before this thing happened, and I'd written about 5 or 6 numbers, and we just got sketches down so we wouldn't forget them. And then we really started working on it, and then this hit, so we couldn't do any more. And then about a week or so, 2 weeks ago, he called me up, said, "You fancy coming in?" So I went in, and we actually, because I'd worked on them a bit more and got the lyrics right and everything, and we banged a couple of tracks down, and they sounded really good. A lot of work to do, but we've got enough for an album, and I think this time we will get hard copies, because people just keep asking for stuff all the time, and it's great, this download thing, but I just don't know. I think people like to have something, you know.
They do, don't they? And I must admit, I used to like to have vinyl, because you had something and you take it to a party and you get a little bit of a scratch on, and every time you played it afterwards, you say, "Oh yeah, that scratch was when so and so had too much to drink and it fell over the." Do you know what I mean? You actually have something, and I think the problem with download is that you put Spotify on, you put an album on, you play a track, that's good. Next one, I'll fast forward it to the next one. Whereas years ago, I remember spending hard-earned pocket money on an album, and I had to like all the tracks, So I used to get into it and sit there listening to it, and you'd get to appreciate it. So David Bowie was a good example of some of his stuff was instantly likable, and other stuff it took a while to get into, but then you really got into it, I found.
Yeah,
and I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about it is, with an LP, you've got the presentation and you'd open it. The graphics on it are good and everything. It's a real statement. Whereas now, download something and you've got nothing, have you? Just got
no. And I guess with your art background, you do all the graphics for your albums.
Yeah, we do it. I'm lucky with my other son, Frankie. He's brilliant at doing stuff. So I can't do anything on a computer. I'm useless, as you know. And I just sketch it out.
Yeah.
And he'll take it and do it with all his computer aids and whatever. He comes up with it and does a great job.
One other thing I saw, Reuben, was that you're now getting back into your on your website. You're certainly doing a lot more painting again.
Yeah, well, that was because I found out that Dave Poxon, one half of the Saxon management, he lives just down the road from me, a beautiful country house. Because I live right on the outskirts of Wolverhampton on the Rock, a Technical Rock. So I can sit in my living room, look out and see the lights. It looks like LA, but it isn't.
It's Wolverhampton.
Yeah, it looks fantastic at night. But we're lucky enough to be right on the edge of the countryside, literally a minute's walk. And he lives about a mile away. And I went over to see him, and there he is. He's got this purpose-built studio, because he was at art school and he'd already done it all before he got into music. And he started again, and he's become, in a matter of about 10 years, he's become world famous. I mean, he's incredible. And he knew what I did because I used to do stuff for Lionheart, and he started showing me stuff about watercolors and things like that. And I thought, okay, so I started painting cars, and I got a few paintings together, and then I thought, I'm going to have an exhibition. So I booked a stand at the NEC Classic Car Show, and some people that built my exhibition stands built me a little stand completely free, and it looked fantastic. And I'd got together, I gave myself a time limit, and I'm going to get 40 paintings ready, all framed, and they were all on this stand. And people came along, bought them, and then I got commissions. Can you do my classic car? So it went on. And then I thought, well, I can't keep on doing cars as much as I like it. I'm going to do one on bikes, because bikes are big up here in the Midlands. Yeah. So I did the same. I did 30 or 40 bikes. And there's a little art shop in Wolverhampton. It's a gallery. And they staged a show for me, which did really well. And then I did one on the bikes, and that did really well. Yeah. So I'm doing a commission now for somebody. Yeah, it's great.
If listeners want to find out more about your work and how to get these paintings, I guess you've got them for sale as well, have you?
Yeah, there's a website. It's called Reuben Archer Auto Art. Yeah. I think if you just go Reuben Archer anyway on Google, all these will come up anyway. But it's autoart.com, ReubenArcherAutoart.com. All the paintings are a lot of the early ones are on there, with portfolios showing. And then there's a Facebook page as well.
We'll put all the details on the show note. That'll then take them to your site.
That's brilliant, yeah.
This has been a great conversation, Reuben. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, can you buy my book, please? No, I'm joking.
Jokes aside, I can thoroughly recommend that book. And like I said earlier in the show, even if you like rock music, but if you just want a little bit more about growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, etc., I think it's a great story to tell, and thoroughly enjoyable.
I was worried at the end when it was done and printed, and I just thought, are people, a rock and roller life, are people going to think this is all about rock? Because I never wanted to, I read a lot of biographies, a lot of rock music people, and they all tend to be, oh, how many girls did this and how much booze and drugs. I didn't want it to be like that. So I was worried that people would be expecting it to be like that, and it's not. It's just a boy growing up and morphing into this. That's all it is. But yeah, you know.
Well, Reuben, thanks very much for being a great guest.
Could I just say something?
Oh, of course, yeah.
I would like to thank everybody who bought the book, because when I had the first batch printed up, I really didn't think. I thought I was going to get left with them all in boxes, and I just couldn't believe it, because within a week I'd sold that batch out, and we were on the second batch. You know, it's never going to be a bestseller or anything like that, but because it's only sold. But I just want to thank everybody that did buy it, because virtually everybody that's bought one has put some comment saying how much they enjoyed it, like you have. And to me, if it only sold 3, that was worthwhile. I just can't thank you all enough. So there you go. Yeah. And thank you for the opportunity to do this.
No, it's been a great conversation. Thanks very much, Reuben. My thanks go to today's guest, Reuben Archer, in part 2 of our conversation. If you haven't done so already, feel free to check out the previous episode where we hear about his life leading up to his rock music career. I hope, like me, you found the conversation fascinating, and I think Reuben's ability to follow his talents and passions, despite challenges, is a source of inspiration for us all. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.